The Lords of Entropy by Doc Flamingo. Book 1. The Wolf of Orion. Chapter 1. As good a time as any. "What time's to be alive," he said with a smile, and hoisted up a glass. Julian McAllister let go a soft laugh and downed his drink, setting the empty vessel aside and nodding his head. Spearing a round of cheese with a delicate stiletto, he afforded himself a vague feeling of satisfaction. Loosening his belt, patting his swollen belly, he held out a long, low belch and examined the great table laid waste before him, noting the stains and crumbs with approval. While far too drunk to be called to peace, satiety suited him well enough. "This fucking heat, though," he thought, wiping his brow with 2 fingers and flinging off the sweat with a flick of his wrist. Noon had crept upon the Viceroy, climbed the low stone wall, and poured itself over the lethargic, midday drinking crowd gathered in the courtyard beyond. While never pleasant here this deep in summer, today was a sultry bitch of the first order. The axe-head paving stones interlocked beneath him were weathered and cracked. Delicate knotwork patterns rendered dull, intermittent lines worn by rain and caked with dust. He could still recall the day they were set, holding one in his laps, on the back steps, entranced by the minute detail of the stonework. He had just turned 8, the memory an old one that intruded now and again throughout his life, unbidden and without purpose. After his mother's death some 20 years ago, the local Christians took up residence, bent on saving the colony from the abandoned shell with its most sinful and debaucherous house. Thoughts of burning it to the ground itched in his mind, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. It would have been taken badly in any case. Back to see his childhood home for the first time in a decade, he was glad to find his mother's brothel free of infestation. Angry voices nearby roused him from nostalgia. Glancing upward, his eyes found a merchant who had come to argue with another patron over timetables or some such. A pint had been thrown in his face, and the man shoved to the ground before accepting that rogues were best undisturbed once the dramming and wenching commenced. On his forehead he bore the snake and rail, a brand denoting him guilty of profiteering on another's misery, likely food or medicine. While these were lawless parts by common standards, the locals most assuredly had their rules. That mark could get you killed here. Julian stared right through the little man when he passed, their eyes briefly meeting. Anywhere else he might have sneered, but this was home ground, so he refused the bother. It would have been a lie to say he had no interest in a fight. The need for a good cathartic brawl weighed heavy on him, but, as a consummate professional, he heaved no coin on the terror of worms. Your quarry needed a fair shot at beating you savagely for any sport to come of it. The big guy who tossed the drink was another story. Smuggler by the look of him, gaudy and overdressed for the heat. Julian disliked him at once. He didn't object overmuch to the man's treatment of the merchant, clearly vermin, but rather his manner. A bully. Julian could smell it on him. "Yar, pig fucker." The voice might have been jovial, but a touch less drunk and unsteady. Deacon sat down heavily across from the captain and began rummaging, turning a clay wine pot to find it empty and tossing it aside. Julian closed his eyes, listening to its shatter. Since a young whelp, the captain had been an enthusiastic connoisseur of the sound things made when breaking, a good plate-glass window being his hands-down favorite, but satisfaction could be found in anything's destruction by a person with the right sensibilities. It truly is the little things, Julian thought, and smiled. Finding remaining spirits, Deacon set himself to task. "A Chardonnay after a bloody massacre, really? You're a fucking savage sometimes." The captain shrugged. "Had I any manners at all, I may have ended up a responsible citizen, and there'd be scarce little to celebrate." "As well teach a wolf to take his lamb with mint sauce," Deacon conceded, finishing off the last swig of wine and sending the empty vessel to join its brothers in the hereafter. "Is he all right?" he then asked, indicating their own brother Billy, who lay slumped over the table, decidedly unconscious. "Thus far," Julian said, dropping his arm after confirming a pulse. "Well," Deacon began, his back going straight, "now that the festivities are wrapping up, do you think we can find a moment to go over the disastrous and entirely foreseeable consequences of all this?" "For the love of Mother Night, no," Julian groaned, the quartermaster getting bookish on him. Even loaded to the gunwales, the men never took a minute off the job. The captain waved him off before the first sounds of protest could emerge from Deacon's already parted lips. They were far too inebriated to get into this, and he had at least a day's worth of gloating left in him besides. He pulled himself forward and leaned on the table with a single arm, looking quite steady and sober from a distance he'd wager. "Do you remember Martha?" "No," Deacon said, "but I remember Maria." "Maria!" Julian cried out, slapping the table with authority and causing Billy to slide off in a heap. "Maria, yes. I'm convinced I saw her." "You did," Deacon informed him, glancing over the table at their brother. "She owns this place. Has for nigh on a year now, I'm told." "Bristol fashion. That practically puts it back in the family," Julian said, and they shared a chuckle. "Well, go and hummel up the devil," Deacon pointed over Julian's shoulder. "And a double health to thee, young gents," said the woman who approached. "Welcome home, boys. Would you be staying the night? Looks as though you'll not make it far otherwise." She snapped a loud and practiced thumb to finger, and a young girl seemed to shoot straight up from the ground. "Bella, my love, head to the top floor and toss who's ever staying in those 3 apartments. Nicely. Refund their coin for the last 4 days, and pass on me deepest need down." "4 days, mother? 4 days is fair. We ain't giving 'em notice. Now move along. Oh, and as soon as the bed's empty, have Captain Billy brought there on the bolt, on his belly, head over the side, with a bucket under." 4 days, the young girl muttered to herself as she went into action. "I heard that, Miss Sassmouth," Maria called after her. "You don't build a business by snaking the clients. You don't by tossing their coin back, neither." "Brat," Maria said, though she wore a proud smile. "Please sit," Julian begged her, attempting to pull out a chair for their host and losing his own. After helping him back to his seat, she smiled and obliged. "I cannot express how grateful I am to see the place back in respectable hands," he confided. Maria cocked her head in confusion, then understood, waving a shop-worn hand. "The crossers? Long gone, them. Didn't last a year. Took the rate in the taverns and tipping the dram, which didn't sit cozy with the salty folk round here. Mob came, branded 'em with crosses, and made 'em move outside the walls." "Good riddance," Deacon said, and 3 glasses rose to agree. "Obnoxious as hell, but I wouldn't trade places with Curacao for a king's ransom," Maria went on. "Lousy with jihadis, the whole place." "Everything they did, and that's what they get run out of town for." Julian's voice grew slick with venom. "What matters is they're gone," Deacon said, hoping to bring the conversation elsewhere. One of Julian's rants on the god folk loomed dangerously near, and no good ever came of one. "I was about to say earlier, while the new ship will certainly be profitable in the long term, it's costing us dearly in the interim. It'll be months before we're competent with all the new gear and have her outfitted to our peculiar needs. Almost everything will go into repairs and upgrades." Deacon began enumerating on his fingers. "We still may have to—" "Life is cruel," Julian said, still desperate to avoid work topics. "I just ran into Broden," Deacon continued, and Julian's head nodded in recognition, "whom I found transferring 1/5 of that medical cargo to Farouk's people. I asked him what was going on, and he just tosses up his hands, telling me to talk to you. I'm the damn quartermaster, Jules, and shipmaster besides. I'd right enjoy a notion what's going on from time to time." "Quit hanging the jib, Killjoy. An opportunity came up I couldn't pass or wait on." Deacon opened his hands in waiting, so Julian elaborated. "The Black Adder is in port." He paused for another belch, washing out the taste of it with a swig of wine. "They had a captive, and I took him off their hands." Deacon looked confused and indignant. "We're slavers now?" "Bugger no," Julian said, offended. "Mr. Blackthorne is a free and salty squire who can chart the course he pleases. I have prevailed upon him, however, into going on account with our merry band of scallywags in the mean." Deacon's hands, still spread, motioned inward for clarification. "Guy Blackthorne, one of the most accomplished naval architects alive today," Julian explained, as if to a child. "A hearty boon for any crew and vessel." "And you sent Brown to fetch his new competition, did you? You are a bastard." "I am," Julian said, pleased with the recognition. He added, with a snicker, "Broden's the one who wised me to him. Besides, we still have another 380, plus whatever we can score for the brigs. Not really suited to make for corsairs, but they're solid haulers." Julian hated talking trade when relaxing, let alone intoxicated, but the thought of coin to drop excited him. The drone rumble of a heavy ship making for orbit filled the air, causing the hair on his arms to stand and curling one side of his mouth in a grin. Even now, tale of the daring raid spread across the 12 stars of the westward marches. growing grander by the telling, as he knew it would.